Welcome to Trend Reddit, a channel where we share and listen to heartwarming, emotional stories about family. Pour yourself a glass of wine, sit back, relax, and let's journey together through unforgettable moments, deep lessons, and the ups and downs of family life. This is not just a place to tell stories, but a space to connect and find empathy. Have you ever wondered what truly happens when trust is broken in a relationship? Secrets revealed, hidden lies, and emotional wounds that aren't easily healed. In today's story, we will explore the dark corners of betrayal, where chaotic and painful emotions make people vulnerable, yet also help them find the strength to overcome. Let Trend Reddit take you into today's story, and don't forget to leave a comment sharing your feelings. Nina Parker sat at the edge of the bed, her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching as her husband Jake moved around the room, packing his suitcase for his upcoming business trip to London. His movements were quick and efficient, as always, his focus entirely on the task at hand. He glanced over his shoulder at her, his eyes soft but distant. "You should come with me," he said, a casual suggestion, as if the idea had just occurred to him. Nina forced a smile. "I'd just get in the way," she replied, her voice light, but inside, she felt the weight of the words. She knew this was just an obligatory invitation, something he felt he should offer, not something he truly wanted. Jake nodded without pressing further, his attention returning to his suitcase. The brief exchange was over, and Nina felt the familiar ache of something missing. The words "you should come with me" hung in the air, meaningless. There was no warmth in the offer, no real desire for her company. Just a routine they both performed without passion. As Jake zipped up his bag and placed it by the door, he leaned down to kiss her on the cheek. "I'll call when I land," he said, his tone warm but hollow. "I know you will," Nina replied, her smile fading the moment he turned away. Once Jake left, the house fell into a heavy silence, and Nina sat there, staring at the empty space he had left behind. It wasn't the first time she had felt this way. The growing distance between them had been gnawing at her for months, maybe even years. Jake was always traveling, always busy, and when he was home, he was preoccupied with his work. Their conversations had become shallow, filled with the usual small talk about his business or the weather, devoid of any real connection. The spark they once had seemed to have burned out long ago, leaving her with a profound sense of emptiness. Nina walked over to the dresser, pulling open the top drawer. Inside were photos of happier times, vacations, parties, their wedding day. She picked up a picture of the two of them laughing at the beach, carefree and in love. But now, as she looked at it, the woman in the photo seemed like a stranger. A deep longing stirred within her, a longing for something more, something deeper, something real. She wasn't sure what that meant yet, but she knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Nina stood by the window, watching the world outside as the quiet of the house pressed in on her. Jake had only been gone a few hours, but the sense of emptiness had already settled deep within her. She couldn't quite place when things had started to change between them, when the lively conversations, the shared jokes, and the intimacy they once had faded into the background of their busy lives. Now, it was as if they were merely going through the motions, two people sharing a home, but not much else. The silence of the house weighed on her, a stark contrast to the noise in her mind. Memories of their early years together floated up, unbidden. Back then, she'd felt alive, like they were building something special. But now, everything seemed hollow. It wasn't just about Jake being away so often, it was about the fact that when he was home, he wasn't really present. They had grown apart, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day she woke up and realized she barely recognized the man she had once loved so deeply. Nina walked through the house, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. She passed by the mantel where photos of their life together were carefully arranged, reminders of a time when she had felt secure, when their future seemed bright and full of possibility. Now, those images felt like relics from another life, a life she couldn't quite get back to. As she stood in the hallway, Nina felt a wave of sadness and confusion wash over her. She didn't know what she was searching for, but she knew it wasn't here, in this quiet house, in this routine that had come to define her days. Something had to change. She couldn't keep ignoring the growing void in her heart. That evening, as Nina sat in the living room, still lost in thought, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw Evelyn's name flash across it. Evelyn Morgan had been her closest friend for years, always intuitive, always there when Nina needed her, even when she hadn't realized it herself. "Hey, Nina," Evelyn's voice was warm, but there was an edge of concern. "How are you holding up?" Nina hesitated, not wanting to dive into her growing sense of dissatisfaction. "I'm fine," she replied, though she knew Evelyn could hear the lie. There was a pause on the other end before Evelyn spoke again. "Look, I know you've been feeling off lately. Why don't you come out with me tonight? There's a poetry reading at this local club. It could be a nice change of pace. Something different." Nina's initial reaction was to decline. The idea of going out seemed exhausting, especially to a place filled with strangers. But Evelyn was persistent, as always. "Come on, Nina. You've been cooped up for too long. You need a night out. It'll be fun. And who knows? Maybe you'll hear something that speaks to you." Evelyn's words hit closer to home than Nina cared to admit. There was a part of her that was desperate for something to shake her out of this numbness, to remind her of who she used to be. After a moment's hesitation, Nina sighed. "All right, fine. I'll go." Evelyn laughed, triumphant. "Great. I'll pick you up at 7. Dress comfortably, it's a casual place." As Nina hung up the phone, she felt a small flicker of anticipation. Maybe this night out was exactly what she needed to break the monotony and find some clarity. The poetry club was dimly lit, with soft music playing in the background as people murmured quietly, waiting for the reading to begin. Nina felt slightly out of place, but there was something comforting about the atmosphere. It was a different world from the one she had grown accustomed to, an escape, even if just for a few hours. Evelyn led her to a small table near the back, where they could still see the stage. "This place has such a cool vibe, doesn't it?" Evelyn said, smiling. Nina nodded, taking it all in, though her thoughts were still somewhat distant. As they settled in, a man approached their table. He had a relaxed confidence about him, his dark hair slightly tousled, and his eyes warm and engaging. "Evelyn, good to see you again," he said with a grin, then turned his gaze to Nina. "And who's this?" "Nina, this is Will Dawson, the owner of the place." "Will, this is my best friend, Nina." Will extended his hand, and Nina shook it, feeling a surprising spark of energy in the brief contact. "Nice to meet you, Nina," Will said, his voice smooth and calm. "I hope you enjoy the night. We have some great poets lined up." Nina smiled politely, though she couldn't shake the sudden awareness she felt in his presence. Will was charming in an understated way, not overtly trying to impress but clearly at ease in his element. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in, even though she wasn't looking for it. As Will moved on to greet other patrons, Nina found herself watching him from across the room. She didn't understand why, but something about him left an impression, stirring feelings she had long buried. If you find it interesting, please like it. If not, please comment number 1. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. As the night went on, Nina found herself reflecting on her brief interaction with Will Dawson. His presence lingered in her thoughts, unexpected and unsettling. She hadn't felt such a strong reaction to someone in a long time, and it both intrigued and confused her. She couldn't quite pinpoint what it was about him, the way he carried himself, the warmth in his eyes, or maybe just the attention he had given her, something she had been craving without even realizing it. The poetry reading continued, but Nina's mind drifted. Sitting there in the dim light, surrounded by strangers, she began to feel a stirring inside her, something long dormant. It wasn't just about Will, though he had certainly sparked something. It was the atmosphere, the creativity, the passion in the words being spoken on stage. It reminded her of a time when she had felt more connected to the world, to herself, and to the things that mattered to her. For years, she had buried these parts of herself beneath the routines of marriage and daily life. Her focus had shifted entirely to supporting Jake's career, keeping their home in order, and maintaining the appearance of a perfect life. But now, sitting in this club, she realized how much she had lost along the way, how much of herself she had left behind. In the days that followed, Nina found herself thinking more and more about Will and the poetry club. She felt a pull, an urge to return to that space where she had felt alive, even if just for a fleeting moment. It wasn't about escaping her life with Jake, but rather about rediscovering something within herself that had been buried for too long. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't ignore these feelings anymore. A few days later, Nina received a call from Will. His voice was calm but carried a sense of urgency. "I want to show you something," he said. "Meet me at the old lighthouse just outside town." Nina hesitated, the suggestion both thrilling and unnerving. The lighthouse was a place she had always found beautiful but had never visited. Drawn by curiosity and something deeper she couldn't quite define, she agreed. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the lighthouse when she arrived. Will was already there, leaning against the stone wall, waiting. The ocean stretched out behind him, the waves gently crashing against the shore. The moment felt surreal, like something out of a dream. As they walked together around the lighthouse, Will began to speak about life, missed opportunities, and how sometimes people find themselves at unexpected crossroads. His words resonated with Nina, touching on emotions she had long suppressed. She felt understood in a way that she hadn't in years. They stopped near the edge of the cliff, the wind gently tugging at Nina's hair. Will turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, without warning, he leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was brief, but it was enough to ignite something powerful inside her. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a moment of clarity, a realization of the depth of her unhappiness and the emotions she had tried so hard to bury. As they pulled apart, Nina was left breathless, her heart pounding. Confusion and passion swirled together, and she knew that things could never go back to the way they were. This kiss had changed everything. After the kiss, Nina felt a whirlwind of emotions crashing over her. She hadn't expected it to happen, and now she couldn't stop thinking about it. For the first time in years, she felt alive, more than alive, she felt awakened to desires and emotions she thought had long been buried. But with that sense of aliveness came an overwhelming wave of guilt. She had betrayed Jake, and that realization hit her hard. Nina spent the next few days in a fog of confusion. Every time she thought about Will and the kiss at the lighthouse, her heart raced. It was as though she had tapped into something she had been missing, but the guilt of her actions gnawed at her. She felt torn between the excitement of rediscovering a part of herself and the crushing weight of what she had done. Jake didn't deserve this, she told herself over and over, but she also knew that their marriage had been crumbling for a long time. When Jake returned from his business trip, he immediately noticed something different about Nina. He tried to reconnect with her, asking about her days and making an effort to be more present. But Nina found it impossible to meet his efforts with the same energy. The distance between them seemed wider than ever, and though Jake reached out to her, she felt herself pulling away. At night, she would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the moment at the lighthouse. She felt guilty not only for betraying Jake but for the fact that a part of her didn't regret it. That kiss had brought something to life within her, and now she wasn't sure how to handle it. She was caught between two worlds, one where she remained a loyal wife, and another where she pursued a truth she could no longer ignore. Nina couldn't hold it in any longer. The weight of her emotions was too much to carry alone, and she needed to talk to someone. Evelyn was the only person she trusted with something this personal, someone who knew her well enough to offer advice without judgment. One evening, after a restless day of struggling with her thoughts, Nina called Evelyn and asked if they could meet for coffee. They sat in a small cafe, the warmth of the place a stark contrast to the turmoil inside Nina. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly before finally speaking. "Evelyn, I did something I'm not proud of," she began, her voice low and shaky. Evelyn looked at her with concern, leaning in. "What happened?" Nina took a deep breath, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I kissed someone. It wasn't planned, it just happened. And now I don't know what to do." I feel like I've completely betrayed Jake." For a moment, Evelyn didn't say anything, just watching Nina carefully. Then she reached out and gently touched her hand. "Nina, you've been unhappy for a long time. Anyone who knows you can see that. Maybe this kiss is just a symptom of something deeper that's been wrong for a while." Nina bit her lip, tears threatening to spill. "I feel so guilty, though. Jake isn't a bad person. He doesn't deserve this. But I also don't know if I can keep pretending that everything's fine between us." Evelyn nodded, understanding. "It's not easy. But maybe this is a wake-up call. You need to figure out what you truly want, Nina. Whether it's Jake or something else, you have to be honest with yourself first." Evelyn's words hit hard, but they also brought some clarity. Nina knew she had to confront her feelings and make a decision, but the path forward was still uncertain. A few days after confiding in Evelyn, Nina felt the pull to confront Will and make sense of what had happened between them. She couldn't keep living in this emotional limbo, torn between her feelings for Will and her loyalty to Jake. She needed answers. So, she texted Will, asking to meet at the poetry club. When she arrived, the club was quieter than usual. Will was waiting for her at one of the back tables, his usual calm demeanor in place, though Nina could sense an underlying tension. She sat down across from him, feeling her heart race as she prepared herself for the conversation ahead. "I needed to talk to you," Nina began, her voice steady but uncertain. "About what happened between us, the kiss. I can't stop thinking about it, and I need to know where we stand." Will's expression shifted, and for a moment, he looked uncomfortable. He took a deep breath before responding, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Nina, I have feelings for you. There's no denying that. But there's something I need to tell you." Nina's stomach dropped, sensing what was coming. "What is it?" she asked, bracing herself. Will hesitated, then finally spoke the words that would change everything. "I'm engaged. I didn't plan for this to happen, but I'm getting married." Nina's world seemed to tilt. The shock of his confession left her speechless for a moment, her mind racing to process what he had just said. "Engaged," she repeated, disbelief flooding her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Will's voice was soft, regretful. "I didn't know how to. I didn't expect to feel this way about you. But I can't deny that I'm in love with someone else, too." Nina felt a wave of betrayal and confusion crash over her. The kiss, the connection she had felt, was it all just an illusion? Nina left the poetry club in a daze, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. Will's revelation had shattered the fragile hope she had been holding onto. The kiss, the conversations, the connection she thought was real, it was all entangled in something much more complicated than she had imagined. As she walked through the cool night air, her thoughts turned inward, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. The betrayal she felt was overwhelming, not just from Will but from herself. She had allowed herself to be drawn into something that, deep down, she knew wasn't right. And now, standing at this crossroads, she realized that she couldn't continue living like this, caught between her crumbling marriage and a fleeting connection with someone who wasn't fully available to her. When she arrived home, the house was as quiet as it had been when Jake had left. But now, that silence felt different. It wasn't just about Jake's absence, it was about the emotional void she had been living in for so long. Will had opened her eyes to the dissatisfaction she had tried to ignore, but his truth had also made her see the reality of her situation more clearly than ever. Nina sat down at the kitchen table, her mind racing but more determined than she had been in a long time. She couldn't keep drifting through her life, waiting for things to change. She needed to take control, to make difficult decisions, no matter how painful they might be. Though she didn't know exactly what the future held, Nina knew one thing for certain: she couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. It was time to confront the truth, to face her marriage head-on, and to find out what she truly wanted in her life. For the first time in a long time, she felt ready to take that step, even if the path forward was uncertain. Thank you for reading this story. See you in a new and better story.